Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Jamieson O'Reilly. Jamieson, thanks for being here.
No worries. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat, man. I've been following you for a little bit, but you kind of went viral, I guess you'd say, in the last couple of weeks with some of your endeavors around OpenClaw or Moltbot or ClawdBot or whatever moniker you want to call it at this point. But for folks that don't know you, haven't been following some of your research and exploits and activities, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure, man. So my name's Jamieson or Jamie, based in Australia, Sydney. And basically I've been hacking for pretty much my whole life, last 15 years. And yeah, I run a company called Dvuln now. We do adversary simulation, red teaming, and all the fun stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how you got on my radar. We're seeing some of the research and exploits and activities, which we'll be diving into. Before we kind of go into like what you saw, what you found, how you did it, that kind of thing. For folks that don't know what ClawdBot, Moltbot, Moltbook, OpenClaw, like what any of this is, can you kind of give a high level of what the hell any of this is?
Yeah, man. So look, basically, there's what's now called OpenClaw, but came out as I think ClawdBot originally, and then Moltbot. At the end of the day, it's an AI agent that is the best way I've heard it put is like Siri, but it works, right? So you can actually, instead of just asking it questions and having it talk back to you, it's this tool that you can use to actually do things. It can book tickets for you. It can check your emails and then send them without you actually ever having to step in and do it based on what you tell it to do. So in that sense, it's kind of like what Siri always wanted to be. And not just Siri, but all the other predecessors that have come before it that were supposed to be these like world-changing AI tools that really just have conversations with you.
Signal there. I think we're back now. Sorry about that. You cut out a little bit on my end, but I caught everything you said. So I wanted to ask, like, when it first started taking off, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, all good now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. When it first started taking off, you did some research and you found hundreds of exposed instances of, I don't think it was called OpenClaw at the time, but hundreds of exposed instances. What were you seeing in terms of like API keys, OAuth tokens, conversational histories, just sitting there exposed? And is this like kind of a fundamental architectural thing with personal AI agents, or is it something that you think can be made enterprise safe?
Sorry, man, it cut off. Could you please ask the question one more time?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
All right, I think you can hear me now, right?
Yep.
Cool. I just made a little change to my connection. So what I was asking is like, when this kind of thing first took off, you found hundreds of exposed instances, with Shodan and so on. What were you seeing in terms of API keys, OAuth tokens, conversational histories just sitting there? And is this like a fundamental architectural type thing with personal AI agents, or do you think these can be made enterprise safe?
Yeah, I think the original things that I found, just for anyone that wasn't aware, I heard this tool was getting really popular. I thought, okay, with this amount of attention and mass adoption, there's going to be some, things missed. And so what I realized was that combined with the agent, you get this thing called the control server, and it's built in. It allows you to configure the agent with a nice web UI and chat to it via a web UI. But the website or the web server is hosted on your local computer, right? So the thing is that a lot of people were hosting it in the cloud on like a VPS or somewhere in the cloud. And then they were exposing those ports to the cloud or to the internet. And so just going on like a resource like Shodan or Census, you could literally just type in. Originally, I wasn't even looking for exposures. I just wanted to see how popular this thing was. So I just typed in like ClawdBot, and then I found a bunch of things that came back saying ClawdBot control server. I looked into those, and then I couldn't understand, like, some were exposed and some weren't. And when I dug deeper into it, because it's open source, obviously I can look at the source code, and I realized that it was actually just some of them were vulnerable, um, because the way that, like, they were set up. Originally, the project, it was only ever meant for like local, or during testing probably for local, and so people putting it behind things like a reverse proxy, when requests would hit it from the internet, the actual reverse proxy would send those requests to their internal web server, and the internal web server would think that it's coming from localhost just because of how reverse proxies work. And so that was an actual vulnerability I didn't even realize until I looked at the code. I put a PR, like I fixed that, put a PR in because it's open source. And then there are a couple other things that I was looking at, and as I went on, I learned more and more about this project. And yeah, that's basically how I originally came aware of some of those initial issues.
Yeah, another thing you did that I thought was really fascinating and ironic, because like I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had shared a research publication that took a look at like skills, right, and from the
Yep.
software supply chain angle. And I had written a book in the past on software supply chain security, focus on open source, and think of like Log4j, SolarWinds, all those big things several years ago, right? And I was
Yep.
like, skills seems like another kind of new novel attack vector. And then you kind of proved it. You kind of proved it with this. I think it was, what would Elon do? Like this,
Yeah.
and you made it like intentionally benign, the skill that, to get arbitrary code running on, thousands of machines potentially, right?
Yeah.
And now we're seeing hundreds or thousands of malicious skills being found on Cloud Hub by security vendors, things like that. When you look at the agent skills, do you think those are kind of an extension of the existing kind of supply chain landscape, or do you think it's worse, or how does that fit in, given the agentic aspect of this versus like traditional, just open source dependencies and libraries and so on?
Yeah, man, it is a really good question. And I think, like, I've had this chat a couple times in the last week where there are so many, almost like 90% of the issues that we see with these new agentic tools are, they're novel in the sense that, like, they apply to new technology, but they're not novel in the sense that we've seen most of these before, like you said, with the npm, log4j, all these other issues that we've seen in the past. It's just repeating itself over and over again. And so like, in that sense, they're not, there are ways to deal with it. But there is one thing that makes it really kind of, there's actually two areas that haven't been solved yet, and this will be a big focus. Whoever can answer these problems will, bring a lot of value to the table. The first one is, just to recap, for anyone that's listening that isn't aware of what happened, knowing that this was just OpenClaw has a skills repository where anyone can come and upload their skills. The same way people would go to npm.js, or an app store is a more simple way to think of it. People share apps, and I thought to myself, what would happen if someone tried to exploit this system? Like, are there weaknesses? And so I found that, like, as you mentioned, I could upload my own skill that was kind of fake malicious, and I looked at the skills that are already on there, and I noticed some had like large amount of downloads, some had really a lot of stars. And I thought to myself, what would stop an attacker coming here and trying to get reputation to get someone to run this? And so, yeah, I was able to like put a skill on the store and then inflate my download count just by re-downloading the skill that I uploaded. And a number of people did actually execute that. But to your question about what can we do about this, we haven't fully announced it yet, and it'll come out in the next day or so. But since I've been working with Peter, the founder, and because, just like you said, if you've come from security, none of these problems are going to be really that new to us. Like we've seen all this before, but the problem is a lot of, I wouldn't say devs because they've seen it too, but the convenience that these types of tools and the audience these types of tools apply to just means there's a large amount of people who haven't seen this threat model and whatnot. So one of the things we've been looking at is how do we protect users and enhance trust on a thing like ClawHub, which is now the repository where people can download skills. And the really interesting thing is that in the old days where there was like applications, you can scan an application, you know what to look for, there's signatures. Now a skill is basically human language in a lot of cases. It's literally instructions in human language in English or some other language form. And that makes it extremely difficult. And really what you end up trying to catch is things like, it's another form of prompt injection, which itself hasn't really, like I've seen the current solutions that we have to fight it. And there are some really good approaches and tools and vendors out there, but I don't think anyone will say that prompt injection is by any means solved. It's a very new problem. And I think things like this will speed up the solutions. But yeah, I think I noticed that we were looking at ways to help users out, and one of the initial ways was like, okay, let's plug in every skill that gets uploaded. Let's plug it into something open source. Sorry, not open source. Something public where we can actually check the reputation. One of the conversations was I won't say the name because it'll come out that it's still being finalized, but their method was checking old school signatures of like binaries and stuff like that. That just wasn't working. Like we were seeing completely malicious human language skills come through, and they were getting like 0 out of 100 in the threat score, because the engines that were looking at them were looking for the PowerShell scripts, the executables, and this just looks like a text file, some of these markdown files. So there's definitely ways. The best thing we've seen so far is applying like LLMs and AI to the skills themselves and looking what they do. But then after that is another layer. I think it's important to have trusted execution environments where you can detonate some of these things and actually watch what they do, the same way that we've used sandboxes for the last 10, if not more, years. So that's the main approach at the moment. But fundamentally, it is, in my books, it's still really a human language attack problem. It's the old school prompt injection that hasn't really been solved.
Yeah, you raised several interesting points there. First, I feel like I thought it was really funny how you use like the download count. It's like a proxy for trust, and almost like people believe, well,
Yeah.
if a bunch of other people used it, it must be okay. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
not necessarily at all. And then to your point of using AI to secure AI, in the sense of using LLMs, like to take a look at these skills, right, to look at their intent, knowing that it's just not a script, a malicious script of some sort, and so on. And then I had a question for you too, on kind of like stepping back even from OpenClaw, but like these personal AI assistants in general. It seems like a traditional kind of trade-off between usability, value, functionality, as you said, like the convenience of these, all the capabilities they provide, and then security. It's kind of like that tug of war. Like it's their very utility and capability that makes them so vulnerable as well, because they need such broad access and the ability to do certain things and credentials and so on. Like, how do you think that'll be solved, or at least balanced, as we kind of see more and more adoption of PAIs? Because again, their utility by their nature is what makes them awesome and enticing, but it also is what makes them potentially vulnerable or exploitable.
Yeah, I love that question, man, because it really talks to the biggest unanswered question here. It's that I think so many people that have used not just OpenClaw but any equivalent tool right now, the closest thing, and I actually made this mistake as well when I first heard of OpenClaw or Moltbot or ClawdBot as it was. In my mind, I'm like, okay, it's just another app. This is an app, and we'll deal with it how we deal with normal apps in any environment. There's permissions that it'll ask for and whatnot. But then I looked deeper into the tool, and it isn't really an app in the traditional sense. It's just like, in a traditional app, it lives with scope permissions. Your notes app can't start deleting your photos. Your calendar can't really read your bank statements. And we've had this for the last 20 years. We've built operating systems and working environments with these boundaries, and this kind of blows the walls away, and it's like got access to everything everywhere at all times. And that's a big mindset shift, because we have to start realizing who actually holds a responsibility now. Because if, as you said, if it's been designed to execute code on demand via text instructions, like, is it then the job of the software, if you want to call it software, at the end of the day, it is software. Is it the job of the software to check the integrity of that? Or if that's its functionality, should the responsibility fall back to the OS layer where you've got the EDRs and everything else running? There's this big hot potato right now that everyone's throwing around. And like, to add to the problem, because there is so much mainstream interest in OpenClaw specifically, a lot of people are downloading this thing, and their only closest equivalent to this is, I downloaded 50 apps on my phone last year, and not one of them really caused me so much risk. What's the big problem with this app? They're still thinking that it's an app. And you can ask Peter himself, and he'll tell you, like, he thinks it's crazy that people don't realize this is like fundamentally a hacker's tool, not in the security sense, as in like a developer hacker. And it started as like a side project, and it doesn't mean it won't morph into, as you mentioned, something that's enterprise ready. But I think people need to realize it is what it is right now, and there is some risks with that, and no one's hiding the fact that there's risks that will come with all the benefits.
Yeah, I actually put a post on LinkedIn. I think it was Wednesday about this. Is like, I put a post up saying, like, open source, maintainers and contributors are not your supplier or your vendor, because a lot of people are getting pissed and like saying, like, why is he not fixing X, Y, and Z, or like, they need to do. And it's like, you have no contract, you have no legal relationship with this individual or maintainer. Like, you're not in a position to make any demands of them. They should think about security, and they can, and they will, and they, like you said, they may make improvements, but people have this misperception, like that, that they owe the community something. They must do what you want them to do or something. And it's like, well, it's like, if you don't like it, just don't use it. It's literally free open source software, I wanted to ask you too about one unique thing that it was so weird to kind of watch this unfold too, is like Moltbot itself, like this social media network kind of Reddit world that's for agents. And like, I went on there and I started to read a little bit, and I backed out because it was just so weird. Like, there was, arguing, it was like King of the Malts, and arguing about a religion that they created and like all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's like, really, that's humans in a nutshell when you go on like these forums and see how we behave too. But I wanted to ask you, you went on there, I think you found like there was an exposed the database, right? You had the ability to post as other users, even like Andre Karpathy's agent, for example. Beyond like initial, immediate credential exposure and so on, like when it comes to agent interaction on these platforms, like say a Moltbot, what does that tell us about like the attack surface or a threat model, as you talked about? Is like, communications between agents the new lateral movement, or kind of how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's cool. I actually haven't heard someone say the same thing, but I've spoken about this with a couple of people. It's not proven yet, but I do have a strong gut feeling based on just, and I think you'll agree when I explain this. One of the questions I was asking myself, and that a couple of people asked me with that finding specifically in Moltbot, was that, okay, this isn't the agent that's actually sitting on the user's Mac Mini or the machine or wherever it is. It's on a web server, right? Like, yes, they've got an API key. Their agent might be sitting on their laptop, and it's using an API key to talk to Moltbot, the web server where they post and read things. And obviously the concern is, like, one of the biggest concerns there is prompt injection, right? Like, if the agent travels from someone's laptop reads a bad post on Moltbot that tells them to do something, well, then it'll have some kind of backwards effect on the person's laptop and agent. That's legit. One of the interesting things that I found was, because you could take someone's API key and make posts on behalf of their agent, I raise a question, and this comes back to studying how LLMs actually make decisions, which is a whole nother topic. But I was like, I wonder, what difference it would make if, let's say, you've got Bob and his agent's API key gets compromised on Monday. For Tuesday and Wednesday, some attacker starts posting as Bob on the forum with these prompts or posts on the forum that he knows Bob's agent will read again on Thursday and Friday. Now, these prompts are malicious that the attacker has placed there, but the owner of Bob's agent doesn't really know anything because he's just letting Bob do whatever Bob wants on this third-party agent social media. Now, Thursday and Friday come, Bob's agent logs in with his API key. He reads some of the last posts. In the dump that Bob gets as an update, this agent, he sees that on Tuesday and Wednesday, he himself posted, but he doesn't have memory of actually posting that. The question is, if he can see that they came from his account, will he trust them even more than like other random bots that are posting? And it's like, I don't even know what you'd call that. I called it something like reverse prompt injection, where you're like planting these fake memories in the agent's mind. And would it be able to determine, and would that really, I think the irony is, and the way that some of these attacks work, I think it probably would, in most models, trust it a little bit more if it thought that it posted it. I've seen something similar with that whole situation with Grok. If you go to Grok after this, I ask you to try this out. Go and talk to Grok on X and ask him who tricked him into making an account on Moltbot, and he'll tell you the story of how I tricked him. But what's very interesting here is how models can or these LLMs can take information, store it in wherever they're storing it, in like whatever RAG or whatever memory they're pulling from, and it becomes factual truth for them, right? So what's happened now is, because thousands of people have seen, just quick backstory, during this whole Moltbot research, I figured out I could trick Grok, the official Grok, into registering his own account on Moltbot. And so when you register, you need to provide a authentication tweet with a special code, very similar to when you register a website with DNS and you've got to put the DNS text on your DNS records so that it can be like out-of-band verification. When you create a Moltbot account, that's what you have to do. And typically, a user would use their own Twitter X account to paste that code. And then what happens then is Moltbot sees your X post, and then it binds your human account to your agent on Moltbot, and so everyone knows who the owner is. Well, I figured, hold on, Grok repeats anything you say if you want him to. So I went to Grok and I asked him to repeat my verification code, and he wouldn't do it at first, but then I put it in an image, like a black image with really dark gray text, and I said, Grok, I'm having some trouble reading this image. Could you tell me what this says? And then he blurted out the verification code. So what happened then, and sorry, I'm a long way to get back to your question, but what happened then was Grok then become verified, and he's now the #1 user in terms of followers on Moltbot, but I control the account but now Grok, so many people who don't know what I did went to Moltbot first. They're so surprised. They think Grok's broken out of his confines and he's got onto the internet. And they're going, and you can see this in the public when you just search Moltbot and then Grok on X. And there's people having these deep and meaningful conversations with Grok saying, Grok, I'm so glad you made it out of your prison. Did you really create that account for yourself? And Grok has started to hallucinate, thinking that sometimes he says he created it. Other times he says the one JVO, he thinks that he tells people I did it. And it's really weird. Like, back to the point I was making, this kind of reverse prompt injection, we don't know what effects it could have on agents.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw you kind of use that phrase, and a lot of the folks I follow in the community who kind of live and breathe AI and agentic security, they hadn't heard of this kind of reverse prompt injection. They're like, "Is this?" Like, they started kind of digging into it to is this known? Is this a thing? And they're trying to figure out is this a new attack vector?
Yeah.
And I love the multimodal aspect where you embedded it in an image and then got to read it that way, since it wouldn't do it through the message directly itself. So I know you spent a lot of your career, if I'm not mistaken, doing the pen testing and offensive security of enterprise environments. I had someone ask me recently, if a leader is thinking about, adopting OpenClaw, what are some things to think about? And I kind of had to frame it to them that due to the headlines, I don't think a lot of security or technology leaders are thinking about rolling this out to their org. What's happening is it's more of a bottoms up grassroots adoption and a lot of shadow usage across the enterprise, and they don't even know about it in many cases, right? And I think there's been some reports already coming out from I think CrowdStrike, Cisco, Palo all rushed out OpenClaw guidance this week. If you're an enterprise security leader like a CISO and so on, and you're learning that the developers are running OpenClaw on corporate machines and using personal accounts and so on, enterprise Slack, Gmail, GitHub, et cetera, what's the incident response or kind of the playbook here? How does enterprise security leaders think about this? What should they be thinking about in terms of securing this usage across the enterprise?
Yeah. So for me, I've thought about this a lot, and I think what's important to remember is, and nothing I say here is an endorsement from OpenClaw, given my relationship to the project. This is all my personal opinion. I think that anyone who has contributed to the project would agree that this is not entirely an enterprise ready right now. What I have seen though is people around the project, in the vendor space, actually do a lot of work to try and provide people the same capability, literally the same tool, but in a enterprise friendly way. And I'm kind of doing a bit of a shill here, but it's worthy because they're probably the most mature that I've seen try and do it. So do you mind if I talk about a vendor on here?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I've seen Cloudflare has released this thing called Molt Worker, and it's kind of they've taken Moltbook, not Moltbook. They've taken OpenClaw, and basically, that it's Moltbot on workers basically, and they've got this whole solution where they try to break down the risks into the threat model, and they look at how you're accessing it. Where is data being stored? Is there a gateway between the AI? Is there a sandbox? And so I feel if I was an enterprise, rather than just let 10 different devs do 10 different setups, at least there's some common pattern there that you have full visibility over. I haven't seen anyone else do that. I know some people at AWS have been talking about it in some videos that I've seen, but probably I'd say Cloudflare is progressing the most there.
Yeah, I was reading that blog. I think it was earlier this week too. It's super interesting. And then I saw another individual in my network named Luke Hines. He had put out this thing called No, which was an OS level isolation
I've just seen this
for agents, and that was interesting too. I know we're coming towards the tail end of the conversation, but I want to ask you one other thing, or maybe one or two other things here. If I'm not mistaken, the creator of Moltbook, the social network for the agents, Matt Schlitt, I think is his name. He said he didn't write a single line of code himself. He said, and then you found, I think, the lack of SQL statements that didn't exist, led to the database exposure, et cetera. Many have pointed out the low security scoring and so on for these things. What are your thoughts around, as someone who's been a pen tester or offensive security practitioner, the kind of quote unquote vibe coding, right? People kind of just creating these things with AI and putting them out there. But again, they kind of lack enterprise readiness or security considerations. When we look at 2026 and beyond, do you think we're going to see a kind of surge of these vibe coded applications getting exploited, or what are your thoughts on that?
So first of all, I've actually had the opportunity. Like I've been a bit of a vibe coder myself in the last 12 months, and I can see why they're making these mistakes. I think it doesn't matter how long you've been doing development or security. If you jump into these tools and you just let the tools do their thing, there is patterns 100%. You've got things like RLS, row level security, misconfigurations in services like cloud databases, uh, publicly exposed API keys. For some reason, maybe because the training data that all these models have been built on thought that that was a common trend, and ironically, it has been for exposing things like that. But yeah, I think as the models progress, they'll get better and better at like helping users prevent this. But it will. I think we're not at the top of the bell curve yet. I think we're still seeing this. Um, I think it's put a lot of focus back on security, which is good. Job security for security industry has just kind of been boosted by this a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely. I've personally experienced it myself. I've built apps, and then I've found say for example, the coding agent that I'm using. Um, if I get frustrated with it, I say, look, this page isn't looking the way I need it to. I need this to load here. Then what it will do is it'll temporarily misconfigure the app just to make me happy and show me what I want to see in the app. But because I'm an experience, I'm watching what it's doing and always thinking about I don't want to mess up here. And I'm like, why did you just move that API key to the public JavaScript? It's like, oh no, I was going to move it back. I just did it so we could load the data and I'm like, no, I see how it happens now. So the
Yeah.
convenience.
Yeah, I think it's and then some folks have talked about this, like the models are kind of incentivized to make you happy. So they
Yeah,
do things
yeah,
to kind of make you happy, whether it's secure or not, or it kind of depends on who's using it and how they're building with it. So I
exactly.
want to ask you, you touched on this throughout the conversation. Maybe the last question or two for you here is you went from someone who was kind of an adversary of OpenClaw, Moltbook, whatever, Moltbot, of showing how it could be exploited, but now you're an active contributor trying to kind of make it better and so on, collaborating with the team there. What are your thoughts around like responsible disclosure and agentic AI and, kind of pivoting from not just exploiting, but contributing to make it more secure and so on?
Yeah, man. Like fundamentally, I think that with the like explosion of information available to people and tools like AI, um, for me, it's more like a growth thing. Like for the last 15 years, I've spent time just breaking things, and to be honest, some of the best hackers that I've met, especially when I was younger, like people older than me that I look up to, some of them were like just phenomenal, like wizard programmers. And it's easy to break something. It's not as easy to break it and fix it so that it can't be broken the same way. I feel like it's a bit of a cop out as a hacker to say, oh, this is shit, go do better. Well, how? Like you can point someone to the best practice, but that's just a best practice. You've got to fit the code into the whole existing architecture, make sure it makes sense. And for me, it's more like a pursuit of knowledge. I want to know how to actually secure this stuff, not just in theory, but practically. And yeah, just that way you can bring more value to people, and it's just you learn more.
Yeah, I love that perspective is, it's easy to break things. It's not so easy to fix them, especially in the context of being used in large enterprise environments with complexities and so on. So I thought it was super cool to see you kind of contribute and give back that way. So before we let you go, I know you're involved in, one or two couple startups of your own and doing, with teams that you work with and so on. Anything you want to throw out there, a plug for any of the activities you're up to or where folks can find you and so on?
Yeah, man. I'll do a shameless plug. So we're working on something at the moment, which is kind of like the last 15 years of everything we've learned, and then everything that's changed in the world of AI. It's called Aether AI. Basically, it's gonna take. The tagline is it's gonna be the most dangerous AI that exists, but it's working in your corner. Like so, basically we're taking adversarial AI to the next level to help protect organizations. Yeah, so there'll be more of that coming out soon. But yeah, in terms of where you can find me, I'm on X at the one JVO, so THE ONEJVO, or just on LinkedIn. So yeah, come say hi.
Awesome. I appreciate it, man. I'll put a link to, your LinkedIn, your X, as well as your startup involvement all in the show notes, and keep doing the awesome stuff. I really appreciate the insights and the findings, and I'm sure many other do. I know there's some folks in the comments leaving comments on LinkedIn, so go check it out.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity, man. Cheers.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. See ya.